Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, the All-Iowa podcast. We're your hosts, Keith and JD. Welcome back to week number 4 of the regular season. Iowa just capped off a fairly nice win over Minnesota and on the road. First game on the road this year, 31-14. We'll get into that. But first, let's cover the question of the week from last week. Last week's question of the week was, when was the last time prior to the Troy game that Iowa had given up a punt return for a touchdown? And clearly this was a much harder question than it should have been, maybe, I guess. Nobody was able to answer it. I had some troubles going back and researching it as well, so I will give credit where credit's due. You kind of have to remember your Iowa history a little bit to know when it happened, but it's a game that most people would like to forget, and I know I would like to forget it. It's one of the few games I actually didn't watch the end of. I watched the first probably quarter and a half and then went to a movie.
That one was hard to watch.
Yeah. So the answer to the question was the 2015 season, but it was the 2016 calendar year Rose Bowl against Stanford when Christian McCaffrey ran a punt return back in the first quarter for 66 yards, I believe.
I think it was.
That was the last time. So it had been 9 seasons.
Yeah.
So
let's hope it's another 9 before it happens again.
I'd say it's 20 before it happens again.
Well, I don't want to be greedy.
Yeah, why not? So, all right, let's jump into this week's game. Bringing home the pig from its imprisonment in Minneapolis for 11 months. It's kind of nice to have this game early so that Floyd gets to escape the Minneapolis winter and get back home, considering it was later in the season last year when he was absconded with and
stolen.
I would say
outright.
I would say removed from Iowa without warrant. It wasn't a fair catch.
No, not at all.
But anyway, talk about this game.
Let's start from the very beginning. Let's just don't jump into negatives and positives. Let's start from the very beginning. I guess when you talk about how Iowa came out, I thought Iowa came out with a lot of energy at first.
Mm-hmm.
And, Minnesota had the one pickoff from Higgins. Higgins got the interception, kind of set Iowa up in plus territory.
38, yep.
And it didn't take long. Iowa ran right down and scored. Made it 7-0. Then Iowa kind of went into a conservative mode. I don't know if things weren't working the way they wanted them to or whatever, and Minnesota's defense tightened up a little bit. They kind of went into I wouldn't call it a funk, and I don't think they played bad until about 8 minutes to go in the second quarter. Then I think things started going downhill for Iowa a little bit. Couldn't generate anything on offense. Defense was allowing way too much on not only the run, but the pass.
Yeah, they let him get way too comfortable, and I think, what did he have, like 9 or 10 completions in a row?
Yeah.
Let him find his rhythm, and you can't do that with a quarterback.
You could definitely tell the momentum was headed right at Minnesota, right through that middle second quarter, all the way to the very end of the second quarter, right up to half. They had it. They had all the momentum, and I was a little concerned. I was not traditionally known as an adjustment at halftime type of team. When was the last time you could sit back and say to yourself, wow, they really made some good adjustments at half?
3 games ago.
This one they for sure did. But we'll get into that. We'll get into the second half. But let's cover the first half as much as possible here. Again, there was another pass play that, give credit to Minnesota. I mean, that pass that along the sidelines that they reviewed was a very good throw and a very good catch. If you could consider it a catch, I guess he had it in bounds long enough, I suppose, that by the referee's estimation.
I think if that was the NFL, and let's make the assumption that he had 2 feet down, that would have been a catch.
No, it would not have been. He didn't complete the catch.
No.
But he was good enough in college to review, and it was good enough for them to say, yeah, it was a catch. And then the next play, they threw a dart that really
was covered.
It was covered. It was a very good pass, right where it needed to be. So you got to give them credit for 2 passes that they really did well on. Castro wasn't really playing the ball as much as playing the player, which was fine. I mean, sometimes you get away with that, sometimes you can't. Unfortunately, he didn't know the ball was coming. He may have been able to if he'd have looked. He might have been able to knock it away, but he wasn't watching. He was just playing the player. And, he caught the ball over the top of him and touchdown. Congratulations, you got 7 points on Iowa. And then, Iowa, I thought, well, let's go down and let's get an answer here. We're 7-7. Game's still very much in doubt. Let's go down and do something about it. They didn't. They punted, and next thing you know, Minnesota's driving down the field again.
Yeah. You think about football and the fact that the offense and the defense game plan for each other, obviously. And there's 11 guys out there doing their job is to prevent one from doing the other, right? And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And that's kind of the way I felt when I was watching it. It's like, okay, I don't think that we were playing bad on defense. We were just playing a little loose, conservative, little less, what is it that Norm Parker used to say, a little less of that 6 seconds of hell. And it was more of, let's try to keep everything in front of us. Just don't give. It seemed like the concept was to not give up the big play this time. And it was allowing the underneath stuff. And he was taking it, and that's the thing that I think in games past, when I've watched Iowa football, too many people on, too many quarterbacks on the other side get a little too greedy. Sometimes they want to get chunk plays. And that's where Iowa thrives, is when you try to do that. And when they're playing their base cover 2, that's their, as you want to call it, their bread and butter defense. When you try to get greedy, if you don't take what they give you, that's when Iowa thrives. And this guy, to his credit, was taking what they gave him, and he was just methodically taking it down the field. And that's going to happen. When you play a soft zone like Iowa plays a majority of the time, you don't bring pressure, it allows that quarterback to get a little bit more comfortable, that's going to happen.
Yeah, he was certainly in a rhythm, and Iowa allowed him to be in that rhythm by allowing the short passes. And when you can start throwing short passes, even if it's 5 and 10 and 15 yards, and your receivers are taking it down the field even further after contact, that really sets you up. You start gaining confidence, you start feeling better, you start, that rhythm really takes control, and you really start throwing the ball really well in very tight places, and you're getting those completions. And, the best thing that could have happened to Iowa was at halftime, to be honest, because that broke that rhythm. And he was no longer, he had to wait for the halftime and then come out in the third quarter. And of course, Iowa had the ball to start the third. So he had to wait for them to get done with their drive, which was a fairly decent drive for Iowa. So, he really had about probably 30 minutes of actual time between the time that he took his last snap to the time he took his next snap. That's an eternity for a quarterback to sit back and not play and not have that, kind of get, I don't know, you wouldn't call it staying loose. He's probably over on the sidelines throwing the ball around a little bit, but game time is different.
Yeah. And I think, the adjustments that Iowa made in the second half played a lot in that as well.
Certainly.
We said it, you were sitting there, we were watching the game together, and I said, he's in a rhythm because we're letting him get comfortable back there. We're not putting enough pressure on him. When we start putting some pressure on him, that will stop. And you notice that when in the second half, they started bringing the linebackers a little bit more, started putting a little more pressure on him. He was off. You throw the fact that he had that 30 to 35 minutes of actual time wait between taking snaps, Iowa making the adjustments, the defensive line putting more pressure on him. And honestly, the backs, the D-backs, and linebackers playing tighter coverage.
I think they did. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like they went into halftime and got yelled at.
Oh, yeah. I'd say there was some chewing going on.
And it was taken well to heart when they came out in the second half, because I don't know, did Minnesota get, I mean, outside of maybe 1 or 2 drives, I don't know that Minnesota got more than about 15, 20 yards in the second half.
I've got that information for you, and I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay. Well, do you want to jump into the second half? Iowa trailing 14-7?
Yeah.
Or is there more on the
thing
first
I really
half?
want to add real quick. I'm going to give Minnesota credit for something here. On that last touchdown play, when they did trips to the bottom and then threw the route to the running back out of the backfield, and then he scored. I called that. Literally, you were right there. I said, look at the bottom of the screen, touchdown on this play. And that happened. Now, I'm not Nostradamus. I couldn't see ahead of it, but I could tell that was something that Minnesota had not done all game. They had not tripped to the bottom, and that was the play. And I said to myself, they're doing something Iowa hasn't seen yet. And if they can execute it, it's going to be good for them. And I called it, and it happened. And I don't want to take credit for that, because that's not a good thing to take credit for. But, you can sometimes tell when teams break their tendencies in order to do something that they aren't comfortable with. And I'm not sure if Minnesota's comfortable with that or not. They did execute the play and made the play and made the touchdown. But you didn't see that the rest of the game. I did not see Minnesota run trips to the right side.
So in that case, I think it was the weak side of the field, honestly.
It might have been the weak side.
We were on that right hash.
Short side. So, I didn't go through and watch every bit of Minnesota's season and games all the way up, but that's a play they did not run all game but once. So, you have to kind of give them credit for that they executed it. And, kudos to them. And they went ahead, 14-7 at the half, which it's kind of strange, because if you think about, when was the last time you watched an Iowa game where the team that was leading at the half the last 3 games lost? That's an unusual stat for Iowa.
Yeah.
Typically, if Iowa's ahead, they tend to figure out a way to
milk the clock and
play the defense and milk it out. It doesn't happen often with Iowa. So, to be down 2 games in a row at the half and come back and win and actually have very dominating second halves is a testament to them. And I don't know if that's an outlier or if that's just the odds coming back. Like how many times can you flip a quarter and have it land on heads? Well, it's going to eventually, you might get heads 7 times in a row, but eventually it's going to even itself out.
Imagine what this team could look like if they put a full game together.
And really, to be honest, yesterday, if you think about it, if it wasn't for half of the second quarter, I thought they played a really good game all game. Now, did they score every time they had the ball? No. But I don't know that Iowa, I don't know if a team out there, unless maybe Tennessee or somebody that can really score, that can take the ball literally every time and go down and score a field goal or a touchdown every time. If you think that that's what's going to happen or should happen, man, you need to watch a different sport, because go watch soccer and see how many times they score.
Yeah.
So even though they didn't score on only the one possession in the first half, doesn't mean that they were not playing well. There were some drop passes. There were some routes that weren't run exactly great. There's just some things that when you add them up, the little things matter. And we talked about this before on other podcasts. It's just, a simple pass that was just out of reach, or a dropped pass that maybe would have extended the drive. You don't know what would have happened on the next set of plays. When things like that start getting corrected, and I don't mean they have to play perfect. They don't. But you have to understand that even though they didn't score on every play or every possession, it doesn't mean that they didn't play. That means that they played bad. They played pretty good all game, except for that half a quarter where they gave up 14 points and didn't do anything at all to help on offense.
Well, I'd almost say that whole entire second quarter, because I think that entire second quarter they had 1 yard of total offense, and they gave up the 14 points. Now, granted, that 1 yard of total offense was, I shouldn't say that, because we ended up getting, what, about 50 of it in the last drive in the last 20 seconds with Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, 2 runs.
But up to that point, it was
Yeah.
1 yard. We had -2 rushing and 1 yard passing.
But they didn't have any fumbles or
turnovers.
interceptions. So,
No.
that goes back to that where we always talked about before, game management. Well, you know what? I guess he did game management for that from the first quarter to the second quarter. I guess you could say he game managed, because we obviously didn't score any, but we didn't give the ball up to them in plus territory either for them. They earned it,
Yeah.
so.
And that's the other thing. If you've watched Iowa football long enough, there's going to be those spells where they don't move the ball.
Right.
And it's, people get down, oh, they're terrible, the offense can't move the ball. Well, as long as the offense isn't turning the ball over, that's not a horrible thing. It's not one of those situations where, oh, well, now, if you're doing it the entire game and you can't move the ball, that's one thing. But, a couple possessions where you have 3 and outs where you're not able to generate anything on the offensive side, sometimes that's in-game adjustments by the defense too. Or maybe somebody got hurt, or somebody just blew an assignment, or
Right.
You're playing somebody in a position that they're not used to because you have to have somebody get a breather or whatever, whatever the case may be.
Helmet comes
If
off.
it's happening
or
all
whatever.
game long,
Yeah.
if it's happening all game long, then you've got a problem. But a possession or two, I don't think too much of it. As long as you're not turning the ball over, giving them a short field, that was one thing that we talk about positive things. Reese Dakin, hell of a game.
Yes.
Averaged 50 yards a punt.
Right.
And he was booming them. It wasn't just, he had a 70-yarder and then he'd have a 32-yarder or something. No, he had 50 to 60 yarders virtually every time.
Yep.
So if you're able to do that, you're able to flip the field, make them go a long ways. You can mask some of those deficiencies if you have a little bit of an offensive lull, so to speak. And that's the other thing. That's one of the things that I follow too many message boards and too many people on Twitter, and it aggravates me to read some of the things that I read, because it's, oh, the offense is terrible, this is blah blah blah, the same old crap as they're 70th, they're top 75 offense right now, and that's all we asked for.
Right.
We said with this defense and an offense in the 70s, we could be a championship caliber team, and now we have that, and we're still complaining. We lost one game. It was one game by 1 point because you gave up 2 big plays. I mean, in reality, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So the season is not over. Sell your tickets if you want. That's fine. That just shows your fandom is fleeting.
Well, let's don't get into that fandom thing. That's a hot button topic for me anyway. So let's just, why don't we just move on to the second half? And I will say, knowing now and watching the game again this morning, this is one of the few games that I said to myself, their halftime adjustments were tremendous. I mean, beyond tremendous. Because the team that left the field going into half and the team that came out onto the field in the second half, completely different team.
The team that came out in the second half is a championship caliber team.
They did. And I don't know what was said. I don't know if it was a series of teachable moments that they were able to fix some things that were going on, or it was a butt chewing, or what it was. But whatever it was, congratulations to the coaching staff, because you made the adjustments that were required. And I don't think Minnesota PJ Fleck did. They didn't make any adjustments that I know, that I could see.
He looked lost in the second half.
He did.
When they kept showing him, he was like, I don't know if you remember that scene in The Waterboy where Henry Winkler had his playbook stolen, and the guy's over there, and he just looks like he's, football for dummies. That's what PJ Fleck looked like on the sidelines. It was like he was completely lost as to what was going on.
Yeah.
And, good for Iowa for doing that to him.
Yeah. And, and I think too that and I've said this before, and you've said it too, and I agree with you 100% that you set up your offense through a series of plays or tendencies that you do
Mm-hmm.
to set up for things that happen in the second half. By what I mean by that is when you run a certain play and you watch how the defense reacts to that play, or you watch the defense that is currently up, if they decide to come in and do a 4-3, or if they want to stay in a 4-2-5, or whatever the case may be, it's how they defense that play, or how they react to how the plays are being played or being run at that particular time, sets you up for later when you say to yourself, oh yeah, I remember that play and they ran this defense against us. So now if they're in this defense, I'm going to run that play again. This time I think I can really get good yardage on it. And no more clear point to that was that when they ran that little tight end bubble thing at the very beginning of the third quarter, we had run that early in the game and it didn't get anything. I think it might have been
play action rollout.
Little rollout and then tossed, and it didn't really amount to much in the first half. But he saw that and he thought how they defensed it, and he ran it in the second half immediately based on the defense that they had run or were running at the time, and it ran for 20 yards. So it was set up in the first half to run in the second half, and you'll see a lot of that down the road. The things that we never saw that with Brian Ferentz. I think Brian Ferentz was a reactive type of play caller, where he would react to the situation and not think about what happened earlier in the game. I don't think he ever did that. I think it was a different style that he used, and I'm not sure he wasn't really suited for that job to begin with. I mean, to be honest, but you can tell the difference between somebody that's a seasoned actual OC that has done this job and somebody who hasn't done this job or who's just sitting in that position. Because, and I'm not saying Tim Lester's the end all be all, he's not. But by the same token, if you really watch the game, you can see his strategies in the first half and then the strategies in the second half that being set up. And I don't want to beat that dead horse, but just the little things that you keep an eye on, the games, the plays that you watch where they make motions, do motions that you didn't see before, like that little round thing that was the transfer from Northwestern.
Oh,
Jacob Gill, where he kind of ran around the quarterback and then they took off in the play. I didn't see that before in the first 3 games. Did you?
No,
I didn't. So they're running things in different sets. Even though it's the same play, they're disguising it to look different each time. So if you've been watching, like Ohio State will watch all of Iowa's games up to this point, but Iowa has 2 weeks to prepare. So they're going to run things the same play, but they're going to make it look different. They're going to have early motions because we talked about motion all summer. Tim's going to run different motions. We talked about this. He's going to do the same plays, but he's going to run them either different locations on the field. Maybe you're at the left hash. He's going to run it to the weak side. He's going to run it to the strong side. He's going to make that play, even though it's the same play that we've ran 4 different games, but he's going to make it look like a new play that they haven't seen before. And he's going to confuse them, just like he said he was going to do. And he will continue to do that. Now he's got 2 weeks to get this prepared for Ohio State, and that's a tall order. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I watched them play against Marshall. They're susceptible to the run a little bit, but by the same token, they're awful good on offense. So you're going to have to play great defense. You're going to have to play awfully good offense to stay with them.
Well, and to piggyback off of that a little bit more, the thing that I've noticed is you can run the same formation, same play 2 or 3 times to set up the same formation, different play.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go out there and he's going to run, twin tight ends to the right with a receiver to the left and a single back with motion. And he's going to run it exactly the same 2, maybe 3 times throughout the first half. And then in the second half, he's going to run that. He's going to show you that same look because now you're thinking, oh, I've seen this play 3 times now. I know what's going to happen. And he's going to run it backwards on you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you set up that, you run those plays hoping that maybe you'll get a couple of yards. You don't want to lose yards, but your hope is to get a couple and then to break one later.
Right.
And and that's what I see from seasoned OCs that know what they're doing. They will run that same thing and they'll show you the same formation over and over and over again. Run that same play. Like, people sit back and be like, oh, you're running the same play. You're running into a brick wall. Why are you doing that? It's because you're setting something up for later.
Mm-hmm.
When you really need it. That third down 3 towards the end of the game, and you show them that formation that's always been run to the right. Now you run it as a reverse, and now there's your first down that wins the game, or there's your game sealing touchdown that puts it out of reach. That's the mark of a good OC. That's somebody that can do that. And as a fan, we sometimes get a little too lost in the fact, oh, you're running the same thing. You're running into, why are you continually running into a 9-man front? Because you're setting something up for later.
Right.
And we don't understand it as much as fans. Some of us who have coached in the past or paid enough attention to football or have watched enough Iowa football over the course of the 26 years that Kirk Ferentz has been there, or the 40 plus years that we've been watching, you pick things up like that. You pick up on those nuances of what are the good offenses doing. Sometimes they're running things that make you scratch your head of like, why are you doing that? Well, it's because you're setting it up for later. And you're setting them up to think same old, and that's an Iowa formula, as most teams are going to expect it to be the same thing over and over again. What they say, the definition of insanity is running the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's kind of what Brian Ferentz's offense was like. He was trying to set up things 3 games from now, not in the same game. And Tim Lester's playing chess in that aspect where he's setting it up in the same game.
Mm.
That's the difference between somebody who knows what they're doing and somebody who was put into a position where they weren't
Qualified.
ready for it. They weren't ready for it.
Right.
Not saying he was not qualified, because he's qualified from a football standpoint. He's qualified to do those things. He just wasn't ready for something like that.
So let's get further into the second half. Iowa takes the third quarter kickoff, marches down the field. That first play, 20 yards. Caleb Johnson had a few runs in there, got down close. I think there might have been a late hit out of bounds penalty on one right then too. Iowa
15 or 16
runs in, scores a touchdown, ties the game 14-14. Iowa has completely pulled that momentum right back. They are now running with the momentum. They kick the ball off to Minnesota. Minnesota goes 3 and out. Bam. Iowa takes the ball. I think, if I'm not mistaken, did they score on their second?
Yeah.
Which one?
Scored a touchdown, busted one up. That's the one I think Caleb Johnson ran for like 46 yards.
40. It was 15, 40, and I think 1, which is 3.
Yeah. And
15, 1, and 40 in that order.
That put us up 21-14, and you could just feel the air go out of the stadium. And then I think right after that, Minnesota went 3 and out again.
They did. They went 3 and out again.
Didn't go anywhere.
Right. And then Iowa came down, and I want to say there might have been one in there where they did end up punting. That might have been later. Did we come down and get a field goal, made it 24-14?
24-14, yeah.
Yeah, right down the middle again. We talked about that. Then I think if I remember right, did they run at the beginning of the fourth quarter? I know that Minnesota had a couple of nice plays, got over the 50.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'll tell you exactly. They got to Iowa's 39-yard line. They made one play through an interception. That's the only time in the second half that Minnesota crossed the 50, or actually
until the final
originated a play in the second in Iowa's territory in the second half. One play, and they threw a pick to Quinn Schulte.
Yeah.
So that's I thought that was defensive dominance in the second half. They did exactly what they should have been doing. And I think you're right. I think what they did was instead of giving Minnesota's receivers a 4 to 6 yard cushion every time to, they were tightening that up to a 2 to 3 yard
yards.
cushion and making them and basically making them change their philosophy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't getting that free run.
And we were getting pressure on the quarterback.
That helped.
Not necessarily that we were getting to him.
1 sack all game.
Yeah, we weren't getting to him, but we were putting pressure on him,
right.
making him think
throw the
quicker,
ball earlier,
go through his progressions quicker. The receivers weren't getting open as fast because, number one, there was tighter coverage, there was less time. So the routes they were running weren't getting open. So he didn't have anywhere to go with it. And you could see it was a completely different quarter. It was an FCS quarterback in the second half, not an FBS quarterback.
Exactly. He definitely had lost his mojo at that point.
Yep. And I think that was had a lot more to do with Iowa's defensive adjustments than it had to do with him just, that 30-minute wait.
Well,
it was the defensive adjustments had a lot to do with that.
I think we're talking about a completely different game had Iowa not deferred to the second half. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Because the way the game ended up, you had no way of knowing this ahead of time, but the way that Minnesota ended that first half, if they would have come out and had the ball the second half, we don't know. That they might have continued the way they were. Yeah, or Iowa might have made the adjustments that they needed and that stopped it. Who knows?
Yeah, they scored with 21 seconds left in the half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't predict it ahead of time, but it worked out well. And, I like it better when we defer. I'd rather have our defense on the field first.
And that was never Kirk's thing in the past. He was always take the ball first, always. And I've kind of liked the fact that he's deferring now. And I think that's, I don't know, it can go one of two ways. It can bite you or it can be great. This depends on how the game goes too.
You know that your strength is your defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to run them out there than it is to run an offense out there that is not your strength, that may go 3 and out and punt, and you're giving them the ball 35, 40-yard line. Instead of making them go from their 20, because they were bringing the ball out. They weren't just taking the automatic 25 yards on the touchback. That guy was trying to bring it out, and he was getting, I think the first return, he got it out to the 21.
Yeah.
And I don't think he got past the 20 after that on any returns. So, I think it's a better philosophy. And obviously it's something that's prevalent throughout college football because a lot of people do it. They want that ball in the second half because, number one, you're either continuing your momentum or you're stopping somebody else's. I think that's kind of the way I look at it. So, it was a fun game to watch, especially the second half. I honestly felt going into it that it was going to be Iowa by 2 touchdowns at the least. Not so, weren't 100% sure on that at the first half of the game because it sure didn't look like that. But
I was kind of the impression
31-14 is kind of an ease.
I was kind of the impression it was going to continue on like the trend had been, that it was going to be close throughout. I mean, there was the stats was something about Iowa and Minnesota had played a 1-possession game for like every game for the last 6 or 8. Or maybe it was 6 out of the last 8 or something similar to that.
Last time it was in 2020.
Yeah, it's 35-7.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of expected it to be very similar in the way that it came last year. And gladly we did put the thing away. And Caleb Johnson had a really, really, he had a career high in rushing yards. So, kudos to him. He's leading the NCAA in yards per game. I'm not sure if he's leading it in average yards per game, but he might be.
He might be leading in touchdowns too.
21 carries for 206 at 9.8 per rushing last night. That's just by himself. And then, Jazzy Patterson had 18 carries for 66. So I was running the ball really well. Is everybody disappointed with the passing game? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm disappointed. He was 11 of 19 for 62 yards in the game. 62 yards. Now, I kind of understand where you scratch where it itches. Use a Hayden Fry kind of analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running the ball well, keep running the ball well. So you're not relying on that pass. So you really basically, and I think something else that Iowa needs to consider, and I don't know if they do it quite as much as they should, throwing on first down.
Oh yeah.
Because I think throwing on first down, especially when you've got a running back like Caleb Johnson, that everybody on the defense on first down is looking at him.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's looking at him. So, to maybe do a play action, go over the top on the first play of the game, let's give him something to think about. Let's take him out of that 9-man front because Iowa was willing to gamble. We got to watch ourselves. You do that to Ohio State and you get it successful once, I don't see them going back to that 9-man front. Now, who knows?
The thing about Ohio State, and I noticed this back in the 2017 game, and if somebody out there is an Ohio State fan listening to this, they'll probably get mad at me for saying this, but I think as a team, Ohio State is an arrogant team and doesn't think they need to play a 9-man front to beat an Iowa. They didn't do it in 2017. A lot of teams were stacking the box in 2017, taking away the run. Ohio State played it straight up. And look what we did to them. And I think they are the type of team. Now, granted, that was an Urban Meyer team.
Yep.
This is a Ryan Day team.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't do so well against them 2 years ago. But they are kind of that, we're Ohio State. We don't need to play 9-man front to stop you. And that will bite you at some time. You're going to run into a team that can run the ball. And if you don't adjust, which I think they probably will, but Ohio State is kind of has that arrogance to them that they don't think they need to. That's something that I think kind of could play into Iowa's hands.
Well, Iowa's got 2 weeks to basically, what I would say is show them something that they've never seen. Put some plays together that they've never been put on film,
mm-hmm.
and make them play honest. Make them have to trust their eyes. Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. But if you throw a bunch of plays out there, or at least formations that they haven't seen on tape, that might get them thinking about stuff. I don't know. 2 weeks is a lot to prepare to get ready for a team that's arguably a national championship contender.
Right.
So, what do you got to lose? Nobody's predicting you to win the game. So what do you got to lose? Pull out all the stops.
At this point, it's the only ranked opponent on your schedule.
Right. Left. Now that Nebraska's fallen off, but yeah.
I mean, that's obviously going to change over the course of the year, but
it might. Who knows? Who knows how the rest of the season's going to go? If we all knew, then I'd make more money on betting than I would ever want to make ever working. So, but I don't do that. So
anyway, let's talk real quick about some positives and some negatives from this game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, from the positive standpoint, I would say Reese Dakin was a positive 50-yard average. Clearly,
I like that I like that after his one kick where he fell down. The guy was trying to hold him up. I mean, that's not something you get from an Australian player in his first 4 games of the season.
Yeah,
that he would be savvy enough to know to do that. So he's obviously been coached.
Well, and I find it funny because I'd gone out, we'd gone into town yesterday morning and got our oil changed, and one of the guys at the car dealer was talking about our punter and said, "Oh, we don't have a very good punter this year." And I was like, you know what? He's just a freshman. You're trying to replace an All-American who probably the best punter Iowa's had since Reggie Roby. I don't expect him to be the talk of the town. He's been solid, and then he took it up a level this game. Obviously, Caleb Johnson's another positive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
3 touchdowns, 206 yards.
That might be the biggest positive.
Yeah.
Against a Minnesota defense that really hadn't given up much all year. This was a touted defense. This defense,
of course, only given up 72 yards a game on the ground.
True, but Rhode Island, Nevada.
I get it.
But by the same token, you still have to do it. So they've done it. And, there were times in the game I thought, well, this is a pretty good defense. But then there were other times I thought, they're wearing down and they are susceptible to,
being gashed on the run.
getting gashed and actually, being worn out.
Yeah. What about positives for you?
Positives for me was just that I think we kept most everybody healthy. Didn't see anybody go off on the side. I know Hayden Large come out kind of hanging onto his hip when he got popped there in the fourth quarter on that little short tight end pass. But other than that, I think everybody came out of there pretty good. I don't know if Caleb had on that one run out of bounds.
He had cramps.
Cramps, okay. So he'd be fine for 2 weeks. I don't know, 2 weeks you'll get a lot of people back. Maybe you could even get some of the guys that haven't played all year. Seth Anderson might be able to come back in 2 weeks. Who knows? Will he be in game shape? Probably not. He'll play, if he plays at all, he'll play limited snaps. This would be a good time to get. Think about this. This would be a good time to get Caleb Brown really into the game. He used to be an Iowa State or Ohio State player. Let's let him show them up. Let's, give him the opportunity to say, you should have kept me, or you should have worked harder to earn my play here, instead of saying, okay, you can go if you want. That's fine. You might have a motivation for that. Who knows? Yeah. Anybody that's an Ohio player would want to always come back into their home state and, play very well.
Yeah, you always want to do well in front of your people.
Yes. So what about, I don't know, positives other than that. Most of the ones you hit, Caleb, I thought that Jazzy and Patterson ran the ball hard.
Yeah.
And hit the holes. I love how when I would run that zone blocking scheme where they would slant to one side and he would go out that way and then cut back into a hole and get 8, 9, 10 yards. I know that he did that on a very crucial 3rd down and 6 maybe, and got exactly 7 yards. That was important. And to be able to do that and do it successfully, that could pay dividends down the line, especially in late game situations. So that was good to see. A lot of good things, actually. I think there's a lot more good things than there was positives for this. And we're bringing the pig home.
Positives and negatives.
Yeah, getting the trophy and bringing it home. That's another positive.
What about any negatives from your side?
I'd like to see more passing, but what we talked about that, how the game plan as it kind of unfolded was more to run the ball because it was successful. You didn't need the pass as much as you would have if it had that game stayed close and the running game not been as successful as it was. Could Iowa, I don't know, we don't know this answer, but could Iowa have been able to answer the bell when it came to throwing the ball? I don't know. I would like to see that. I would like to see the passing game picking up a little bit more. I'm not going to say that, 11 of 19 for 62 is good. It's not. But I'm not going to say too much bad about it because it was just really, we didn't need it.
It was a product of what was being called.
Exactly. Well, a product of how the game was going.
Yeah. You rode the hot hand.
Yep.
I'd say for me, if I was to pick any negatives at all, I'd say it's just the lack of pressure from the defensive line. And it's not like it's been terrible. It's not like, oh, well, they're just standing there in place and they're not getting the guys just standing back there all day long. They're getting some pressure on him. It's just not fast enough. And then they had to bring in, they had to bring a linebacker, or they had to bring, somebody off the edge or something just to generate some pressure. So that to me is maybe a negative. Not really a huge negative, just because they're doing their job. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're eating up blocks and allowing the playmakers to make plays in space. The linebackers, the Castro at the cash, the safeties, the corners. They're coming up and run support. Iowa's run defense again has been stellar.
Yeah. Yeah, they did give up a longer run to Taylor, I think.
Yeah,
in that second drive to the touchdown they gave up like a 20-yard run. But other than that, no, they kept it in check.
But how many rushing touchdowns have they given up this year?
Iowa?
Yeah,
none. Not a one.
Exactly.
0.
And giving up about 68 yards per game on the ground.
Yeah, I didn't write that down. I'd have to look that up.
So, that's another positive. Even it's hard to find negatives harder to find negatives in a win than it is in a loss. That's for sure.
Especially a win on the road against a team that traditionally gives you fits.
Yeah.
And to win by 17, and really, to be honest, by that fourth quarter, it was pretty much in hand. The defense had clamped down on Minnesota. Minnesota really didn't have a whole lot to answer with. Like I said,
they took away their will to play.
They're close. Yeah, like I said, they one snap originated in Iowa territory in the second half, and that was from the 39-yard line, and it resulted in an interception. So, and not a lot of people talk about that, but that's kind of an important thing for the defense. When you saw the way they were, especially in that midway through the second quarter, the way Minnesota was running that ball and throwing the ball against Iowa and getting it down the field relatively easily, I thought.
Yeah.
And then to come back in the second half and put the clamps on like that was just it's quite a juxtaposition of what the first half was. So,
well, we did to them in the third quarter what they did to us in the second quarter.
Exactly.
It's complete reversal. So
kudos to the coaches. Iowa made the adjustments, and the car salesman, he didn't make any adjustments, and all he could do was sit on the sidelines and cry.
Yep, he didn't even do his little put his four fingers up in the fourth quarter and sprint down the sidelines. He just kind of walked.
Yeah.
I was like, well, you can tell he's not into this now. He's had his air taken out of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So real quick, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the conference.
Okay.
What's something that has kind of stood out to you through the first 4 weeks throughout this conference? Surprises, disappointments.
I think Indiana's a little bit better than what I thought they would be. Now, you have to take into consideration too, I think, that their opponents that they played. Charlotte, come on, who are they?
They played nobody.
Yeah.
And their only Power 5 team is UCLA.
Yeah, and UCLA is probably the doormat of the Big Ten, to be honest. So, I think at this point they're kind of a paper tiger.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the entire game of Illinois and Nebraska the other night on Friday night, and was rooting for Illinois, obviously. Illinois is better than I thought they would be. And I didn't think they would be that bad. I thought they actually would be fairly decent. So they are better than I thought. We'll see how the rest of the season goes for them. I think things pick up a little bit for them schedule-wise, as far as difficulty. Michigan beating USC. They pulled it basically in Iowa. They ran the ball and didn't throw it and relied on defense, and they got the win. So, that's basically an Iowa recipe right there. Who else? Michigan State losing to Boston College. That doesn't surprise me. Maryland won big over their FCS team, probably, that they played. I'm not sure who it was. It was nobody. Penn State, same thing was it Akron or whoever they played?
With their MAC school.
Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me. Washington beating Northwestern decisively.
Doesn't surprise me.
I thought Northwestern would keep it closer than they did. But, that was probably their first time out to Washington, and who knows? I don't think Northwestern's very good. I know I didn't have them doing very much this year. In fact, I think I had them 16th out of 18. I think it was UCLA, Indiana, and Northwestern, I think, is my last three. I'm trying to think who else would have been playing. Ohio State took Marshall to the woodshed, but that was fairly close in the first quarter. Rutgers, beating Virginia Tech. Yeah, that was a close game. Probably closer than it should have been. UCLA losing to LSU, I predicted that. but I was closer. It was 17-17
and I don't think
at the half.
LSU is that good.
No, I don't think they are either. I don't think they're.
I shouldn't say it that way. I should say they're not as good as people think they should be.
Right now, I think the class of the SEC, and I don't want to go back into the SEC, but I think the class of the SEC right now might be Tennessee,
Texas and Tennessee.
Texas and Tennessee. Wouldn't surprise me to see those two end up in the championship game. I mean, Tennessee right now looks really, really good. They took Oklahoma, and it really wasn't that close of a game. I mean, the final score wasn't really indicative of how dominant that Tennessee really was. And I didn't get a chance to really watch all of that game, but I did see a little bit of it when I got home. But
yeah, Oklahoma put a drive together late in the game to score a touchdown, and 25-15. But I think Tennessee was playing kind of a, let's just
get out of here.
Try to keep them in bounds and run the clock and get out of here.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is another one that's kind of a surprising team. That wouldn't surprise me to see them in there as well. I mean, they're one of the top defenses in the SEC so far, and they're the top offense in the country.
It's going to be interesting to see how the SEC plays out. I don't want this to be a SEC thing with an Iowa with what we are doing here, but I think we're right back again to where we were before. The Big Ten and the SEC are the conferences to watch out for, and I think that the champion of the national champion will come out of one of those two conferences. And right now, the SEC has some better teams at the top. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Oregon and Ohio State are quality teams. Don't get me wrong. But when you're talking about Tennessee and Ole Miss and Alabama and Georgia, I think those four teams right now.
And Texas.
And of course, Texas. I keep forgetting about Texas, but they're right there too. But Texas, right? There's 5 teams right there that I think could probably be at least 3, 4, 5, maybe in the Big Ten. If not, if you take Ohio State out, and then there'd be the top. So, to me, I think it's very top heavy in the SEC, and I think the Big Ten has really 2, maybe 3, if you add Penn State in, that are of inequality. And if you take me and if I was to take Ohio State and run them up against Tennessee or Texas, I don't know how that'd come out. There's no clear winner. Texas would probably have the advantage and would probably be the odds-on favorite to win that game from the bettors. And then if you went number 2, and let's say Tennessee right now is, let's say, number 2, and you go up and put them up against Oregon, I think, that would be a good close game. But I think you'd probably have to give the favorite to Tennessee. So I hate to say this, because I don't care much for the SEC. But right now, I think that's the best conference in football.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they have 5 of the top 7 teams in the country right now.
Yeah. And, they're going to beat each other up just like that Big Ten will.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be there's going to be a team that's going to lose a player. Remember last year, Florida State was running through everybody like it was no big deal. And then they got that major player hurt, that quarterback, was it?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, they just lost it. I mean, they got smoked in their game. Was Georgia beat them like 55-0 or something similar to that? It was terrible.
It was bad. And they did they win yesterday? I didn't even pay attention.
I don't know if Florida State won or not. Did they start the season 0-4?
That's what I was wondering, because I know that at one point we were talking about it, and it was late in the game, and they were ahead, but it was only by 4, and the other team was at like the 12-yard line. That's the ACC, right?
Yeah. Well, when I usually watch the ticker at the bottom, I usually only show you the top 25. They don't, of course, Florida State.
So Florida State did win 14-9 over Cal.
Cal.
Yeah. Cal had to make the trip out there for a conference game.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah. This is definitely a strange thing. And the other, just to talk a little bit about things that I saw yesterday, and it does kind of pertain to an Iowa Flame favor here. I watched North Carolina and James Madison, and knowing that North Carolina beat Minnesota early in the year, granted, yes, it was first game. I get that. I felt a lot better about Iowa's chances against Minnesota at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, James Madison absolutely boat raced them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
70 to 50?
56 to 14 and a half, something like that.
Ended up 70 to
Favorite
50.
James Madison? Yeah.
If you like
Yes.
offense, that would have been the game to watch.
I mean, that would be a basketball score, 70 to 50.
Right. Except I think North Carolina would probably beat James Madison 70 to 50.
Yeah, it should roll reversal there. But,
yeah.
So it just, there's certain things you just can't figure. And you know, as much as I hate to say it, that Hail Mary that Colorado tied the game up against Baylor that was a pretty good play. That was a pretty good, fun one to watch. You know, and
Yeah.
I can't stand the Sanders connection there. I'm not a Deion Sanders fan, and I'm not I think the kids are propped up way too much.
Mhm.
But I'll give credit where credit's due on that. That was a heck of a play, and that was an exciting game, end of the game to watch.
Mhm.
You know, and then to lose it like they did, Baylor did, that's, and I did watch K-State and BYU as well, and I have no idea how K-State was ranked that high. They're not.
And I don't know why they still are ranked.
Yeah, that's
we'll see tomorrow when the actual AP comes out. We'll see how they are. But what I saw was the way too early rankings for this week, and K-State was 21 or 22 with a loss.
I saw them at 24th or 25th.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of them didn't even have BYU in the top 25. I'm like, you just had a team that won 38-9.
Well, the one I saw did have
ranked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
4-0 and just beat a ranked team. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, you know, we've talked about it before. You shouldn't be ranking teams until probably about 6 games in anyway. So
6 or 8 even. Yeah.
Yeah. But you got to have something to talk about. So let's put a bow on yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Nice game, nice win for Iowa going into the bye week, 3-1. As most fans would say, we'd like to be 4-0. Probably should be 4-0, but the reality of it is you know, kid kicked a 56-yard field goal to beat you. It happens.
Yeah.
You know, can't go back and change it now. Wish we could, but can't. So you go into the bye week 3-1. Got 2 weeks to prepare. Stranger things have happened. You know, 2017, nobody expected it. 2016 against Michigan, nobody expected it. So, you know, I'm going to go in with a positive attitude. You know, it sucks that it seems like we get one game against Ohio State at home, and then we have to play 3 or 4 on the road against them over the course of the next 6 years. Great years. But
did I hear a stat the other day that Iowa has opened up on the road in the Big Ten either 18 of the last 24 years or 16 of the last 24 years?
Doesn't surprise me.
That seems very one-sided. You know? Weird quirks in the scheduling, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's some fraternizing going on with that scheduling sometimes too. You know, there's athletic directors in their ears going, "Oh, we want this team here, we want this team here." So who knows? Well, it is what it is. You play the games that are on your schedule. You play them when you're supposed to play them. You know, it's fine. If you have 3 straight home games to start the season in your non-conference, then I guess you can start your conference season on the road. So
I don't know. Ask Michigan. I don't think they've played on the road since the national championship game.
I don't think they do until after the 5th game.
Yeah.
I think they have another one at home, and then they finally play on the road.
They have Minnesota next week, don't they? I'm pretty sure.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Minnesota has to travel to the Wolverines.
Yep. They're playing for another trophy.
We'll see how that goes. Minnesota just got done playing Iowa, who plays very similar to what Michigan's going to play like.
Yeah, and Michigan will take a lot from that game plan and say, "Oh, well, we see what they can do.
We're going to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Till Minnesota stops us, we're going to run it." And that's exactly what they did yesterday with USC. They ran it until they stopped it, and they didn't stop it.
Well, they ran it because they had to, because they didn't have anybody to throw it, really.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Iowa last year. And
The only difference
yesterday.
being is the kid that they have that's back there playing quarterback can run too.
That has some advantages. We've talked about that too.
Yeah. So anyway, put a bow on that, and let's wrap up here with a new question of the week.
The new question of the week is, prior to last night, prior to Caleb Johnson scoring 3 touchdowns, who was the last Iowa player to score 3 touchdowns in a game? Give me his name and the game and the year, maybe.
Okay.
So who was it?
Yeah,
I won't give you
unfairly,
any
I know
hints.
who it is. I know who it is. So,
Did I tell you who it was?
I think I guessed it when we talked about it, but it took me several players to get to it.
Yeah, we talked about it last week before, and then we went with a different question. But yeah, see if you can answer it. You can look it up. It's going to take a little bit of review. So unless it's something that you can literally Google the question and have it come up, you're going to have to do a little research, because I had to do a little research to get the question, to get the answer to the question myself.
And I think based on our responses in our to our questions of the week, maybe we should put more Google questions back in there.
Nobody's answering, you mean?
Yeah. So, but speaking of which, as we always say, if you like our content, please subscribe, share, like our posts here, or like our videos. Definitely subscribe if you can. We did get a few subscribers over the last week and a half or so. Comment, give us your comments. Tell us your thoughts on the game as well. Tell us your thoughts on the game coming up against Ohio State if you want. Who's been your surprises in the Big Ten as well, or throughout the country? What's something that surprised you, or has played out kind of the way you anticipated it? Something to that effect. So, always catch us on Facebook as well, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, TikTok, all the social media platforms. Tell your friends about us. We are working on some swag. We did get a lot of positive reviews back on the logo, by the way.
Yeah.
So glad that people enjoyed that and they like that. We're working on possibly getting some shirts and some other merch if you're interested. Try to help us grow this channel as best you can.
Yeah.
We're not looking to monetize off of it. We're just looking to get it out there for anybody that finds what we talk about interesting, or, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to laugh at us as we're talking, that's fine too. You're just watching us.
Yep.
So
yeah, we have a good time with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up, and as always, let's end it on a rousing "Go Hawks."
Go Hawks.